The wedding invitation arrived in an envelope lined with gold leaf. Inside, elegant calligraphy announced my cousin Beatrice's wedding to Lord Henry Ashford at his family's estate in the Cotswolds. At the bottom, a handwritten note from my aunt. Regrettably, we're keeping the guest list quite select this year. Family attendance limited to immediate relatives only. I'm sure you understand the social complexities involved. I didn't understand. I was family. I called my mother. Aunt Margaret says I'm not invited to Beatrice's wedding? A long pause. Darling, it's complicated. The Ashford family is, well, they're proper aristocracy. Old money, connections to Parliament, the whole lot. Beatrice is trying to establish herself in those circles, and Margaret feels it's best to present a certain family image. An image that doesn't include me? You work in government economics, dear. It's respectable, but it's not quite the same as what your cousins do. Beatrice is marrying into the peerage. Your brother Oliver works in private equity. Your cousin James just made QC. They understand that social sphere. You'd feel terribly out of place. At 29, I'd heard these arguments in various forms my entire adult life. My family had always been social climbers, desperate to break into Britain's upper echelons through the right schools, the right jobs, the right marriages. Beatrice marrying Lord Henry Ashford was the culmination of decades of strategic networking. I was Sophia Hartley, who worked in government economics, a description my mother used that suggested I analyzed tax data in a basement office. What they didn't know was that I was the chief economic advisor to the Prime Minister. At 27, I'd become the youngest person ever appointed to the position. I designed fiscal policy, advised on budget strategy, coordinated with the Bank of England, and briefed the cabinet on economic forecasts. The PM consulted me before making any major financial decision. I made £175,000 annually, worked from number 10 Downing Street, and held one of the most powerful positions in British government. Financial markets moved based on policy recommendations I drafted. I lived modestly in a Clapham flat, took the tube to work, and kept my position intensely private. My family had always made clear that government work was for people who couldn't succeed in private banking or law. I'd also been financially supporting my parents for 6 years. £7,000 monthly deposits they called investment returns from a portfolio they supposedly managed. My father's consulting firm had failed. My mother's interior design business existed mostly on Instagram. Their Kensington lifestyle ran entirely on my salary and Oliver's occasional contributions. I see, I said quietly. Well, I hope Beatrice has a lovely wedding. I knew you'd understand, darling. Margaret was worried you'd make a fuss. Perhaps we can do lunch next month. What my mother didn't know was that Prime Minister David Richardson had received an invitation to Beatrice's wedding. The Ashford family had extensive political connections, and Lord Henry's father sat in the House of Lords. The PM had initially declined, but his scheduler had flagged it as politically important. Yesterday he'd asked me about it. Sophia, this Ashford wedding, do you know anything about it? My office thinks I should attend, but I'd need you there for the political networking. Half the Lords will be present, and we need to discuss the infrastructure bill. I'm familiar with it, Prime Minister. It's my cousin's wedding. His eyebrows had risen. Your cousin? Well, that settles it. RSVP yes, and you'll accompany me. We can make it a working event. I'd initially planned to decline, not wanting to overshadow Beatrice's day. But being told I wouldn't understand sophisticated society changed my perspective. I'd be happy to attend with you, Prime Minister. The wedding was held on a Saturday in June at Ashford Manor, a sprawling estate that had been in Lord Henry's family since the 1600s. 300 guests filled the grounds. Aristocrats, politicians, business leaders, and my family, who'd positioned themselves at the center of the social event of the season. I arrived at 2:15 p.m. in the Prime Minister's motorcade, 3 vehicles with diplomatic plates and security detail. We entered through the main gates, bypassing the guest queue entirely. The security team coordinated with estate staff while the PM and I waited in the car. Through the window, I could see guests arriving in expensive cars, women in elaborate fascinators, men in morning suits. Ready for this? The PM asked with a slight smile. Your family has no idea you're coming, do they? None whatsoever. This should be interesting. Let's go make some political connections. We exited the car. The PM's protection officers flanked us as we walked toward the ceremony area. Guests turned to stare. The Prime Minister's presence changed everything about an event. My mother saw us first. She stood near the entrance with my father and Oliver, dressed impeccably and clearly positioned to greet important arrivals. Her face cycled through confusion, shock, and absolute horror as she recognized me beside the PM. "Sophia? What are you? Why is the Prime Minister?" Prime Minister Richardson extended his hand warmly. "Mrs. Hartley, I presume? Delighted to finally meet you. Sophia talks about her family often. I'm David Richardson." My mother shook his hand mechanically, her brain clearly struggling to process what was happening. "Prime Minister. We're honored. I didn't realize Sophia never mentioned that she works for me." He smiled. "Yes, Sophia's remarkably modest about her position. Best chief economic advisor I've had in 20 years. The Treasury Secretary calls her a genius. I call her indispensable." My father had gone completely pale. "Chief economic advisor? Sophia, you told us you worked in government economics." "I do work in government economics. I'm the chief economic advisor to the Prime Minister. I design fiscal policy for the entire country." Oliver appeared, his private equity confidence faltering. "You work at number 10? Like actually in Downing Street?" "My office is 3 doors from the cabinet room. The PM and I have morning briefings daily." Aunt Margaret materialized, moving quickly to intercept potential disaster. She was the architect of this wedding, the social climber who'd spent decades positioning the family for this exact moment. "Prime Minister Richardson, what an unexpected honor. We had no idea you'd be attending." Sophia mentioned her cousin was getting married. Seemed like an excellent opportunity to discuss the infrastructure bill with several lords who'll be here. "I hope we're not disrupting your seating arrangements." "Not at all. We're delighted. Though I must confess, we weren't aware Sophia held such a senior position. She's always been rather vague about her work." The PM's expression cooled slightly. "Vague? Sophia's position is one of the most senior in government. She advises the cabinet, coordinates with international finance ministers, and shapes policy that affects 67 million people. There's nothing vague about that." A crowd had gathered, guests drawn by the Prime Minister's presence, family members trying to understand what was happening. Beatrice appeared in her wedding gown, her moment of glory already overshadowed. "Aunt Sophia?" Beatrice's voice was uncertain. "I didn't know you were coming. Mother said you weren't on the guest list because..." She stopped, clearly remembering the explanation given, that I wouldn't understand this level of society. The PM looked at Aunt Margaret with raised eyebrows. "Not on the guest list?" The chief economic advisor wasn't invited to her own cousin's wedding. Aunt Margaret's face had gone from pale to gray. There was a misunderstanding about the guest limitations. Family attendance was meant to be immediate relatives only. "Sophia is your niece. That sounds fairly immediate to me." Lord Henry's father, the Earl of Ashford, approached with the kind of authority that came from centuries of inherited power. "Prime Minister, welcome. I'm Ashford. Delighted you could attend." He turned to me with genuine warmth. "And you must be the brilliant Miss Hartley. I've read your economic forecasts. Exceptional work on the growth projections." "Thank you, Lord Ashford. I'm honored." "The honor is ours. Henry," he called to his son, "come meet the Prime Minister's chief economic advisor. She's family of your bride." Lord Henry approached, looking distinguished in his morning suit. "Miss Hartley, I've heard tremendous things about your work from my father. He follows your policy recommendations religiously." He glanced at Beatrice, then at Aunt Margaret with barely concealed disapproval. I wasn't aware Beatrice had such an accomplished cousin. Why wasn't she mentioned in the family introductions? Beatrice looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her. "I didn't know about Sophia's position. Mother handles the family communications." "Your mother told us Sophia worked in government administration," Lord Henry said coolly. "She failed to mention Sophia basically runs Britain's economic policy." The ceremony was about to start, but everyone was suddenly talking about me. Members of Parliament came over to discuss policy. Business leaders asked the Prime Minister to introduce them to me. Lord Ashford personally walked us to the VIP seats in the front row. My family sat 3 rows behind us, watching their perfect wedding plan fall apart. The wedding they excluded me from was now centered around my presence. During the ceremony, the Prime Minister whispered questions to me about different lords. I answered quietly, explaining their concerns and the data I had prepared. Behind us, I could hear my family whispering nervously, clearly shocked. At the reception, the ballroom filled with guests who came straight to the Prime Minister and me. People wanted to talk about economic policy and government plans instead of the bride and groom. Lord Ashford introduced me to several lords as the Prime Minister's chief economic advisor, and I led every discussion with confidence. My family stood on the edges of the room, unable to reach me because of the crowd. At 6:30 p.m. the Prime Minister got ready to leave. He thanked me for helping him secure support for the infrastructure bill and told me to attend Monday's cabinet meeting. Then he left and the room finally shifted back to normal. My family cornered me outside. Aunt Margaret said they didn't know I held such a senior position. I told them I had always said I worked in government economics, but they never cared enough to ask more. They excluded me from the wedding because they assumed I wasn't sophisticated. Beatrice snapped that I had ruined her wedding because everyone was talking about politics instead of her. I told her I hadn't invited the Prime Minister. He came because he needed his advisor. If that overshadowed the wedding, it was because they had underestimated me. By Monday, all of London's social circles were talking about the Ashford wedding, not because of the aristocratic family, but because they had excluded the Prime Minister's chief economic advisor. I had dozens of missed calls. My mother emailed apologies. Oliver said his business contacts were shocked he never mentioned my job. I ignored all of them. The money I sent my parents each month stopped. Without it, their Kensington lifestyle fell apart. Lord Ashford, embarrassed by their behavior, quietly distanced his family from the Hartleys, making Beatrice's social dreams much harder. 6 months later, I presented economic forecasts to the full cabinet. The Prime Minister introduced me proudly, saying my work was vital to the country's recovery. My family finally learned that real sophistication comes from ability, not social status. They were right when they said I didn't understand their world, because I worked at a level far beyond it, where substance mattered more than appearances. Their social climbing failed. And I ended up exactly where I belonged, at the table where real decisions are made.